Congratulations, you clicked on the right video, and in this video we're going to be talking about the best player of all time for each franchise, starting off with the Atlanta Hawks, Dominique Wilkins. The reason I picked Dominique is because he was a 9-time All-Star, averaged 24.8 points in his career, 6.7 rebounds, and 2.5 assists. He was known for his dunking, and he's definitely the best Atlanta Hawk of all time. Next up we have Larry Bird. I picked him over Bill Russell because he's known for some great plays that don't show amazing on the stat sheet, like his steal against the Pistons and a couple amazing shots. Larry Bird is just the greatest Celtic of all time. Got 21,700 points in his career playing on the Boston Celtics. For the Brooklyn Nets, we have Julius Erving over Jason Kidd because Julius averaged 22 points per game, 6 rebounds a game, scored so much points in playoff history, and he was one of the first people to do the reverse layup. Next up we have the greatest Charlotte Hornet of all time, Muggsy Bogues. What? Oh yeah. I'll put Glenn Rice on this list for best Hornet of all time because he shot 40% from three-point land, averaged 18.3 points per game, great scorer, great shooter, and he was in the debate versus Alonzo Mourning, and I give it to Glenn because he was a great player, great shooter, and great scorer. For the Bulls, we have Michael Jeffrey Jordan. Obviously, he's not as good as Michael Scott, but he's getting close. Michael was the greatest Bull of all time. He averaged 30 points per game, didn't even play that long in his career, still top 10 in all-time scoring. Him versus LeBron, best all time. Well, Michael Jordan second, Michael Scott number 1. For the Cleveland Cavaliers, we have LeBron James. The reason I took LeBron James is because he's the greatest Cavalier of all time. And he's third all-time in scoring. He's getting up there in assists. And he's getting up there in triple-doubles. Plus, it was either him on the Heat or him on the Cavs. And I chose Cavs because Cavs only have Kyrie and Heat have Dwayne Wade all time. For the Dallas Mavericks, we have Dirk Nowitzki, and he's the greatest Maverick of all time, king of the fadeaway, best player in Germany ever. And the only other person in the conversation would be Jason Kidd, but obviously I took Dirk Nowitzki, top 10 scorer of all time. Next up, we have Alex English for the Denver Nuggets, great scorer. And he could play good defense, too. Averaged 21.5 points per game in his career on the Denver Nuggets. The other person in the conversation would be Kiki Vandeweghe or Nikola Jokic, the Joker. Jokic isn't the best Nugget of all time yet because he hasn't proved enough. He won an MVP just this year, but certainly he might become the best Nugget of all time pretty soon. Detroit Pistons, we have Isaiah Thomas. And he's definitely the best Piston of all time, part of the Bad Boy Pistons. And he only averaged 19.3 points per game, which isn't amazing, but he averaged 9.3 assists. He was great at passing and definitely a true point guard. For the Golden State Warriors, we have Stephen Curry. The reason I picked him over Wilt Chamberlain, Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant, and a lot of other people is because Kevin Durant, one, didn't play that long for the Warriors. Wilt Chamberlain did not play so long for the Warriors, plus he's on another team later in this list. And a couple other players, just not as good as Curry because Curry's the best three-point shooter of all time. Nobody's ever going to get better than him at shooting threes. For the Houston Rockets, we have one of the best scorers, one of the best shot blockers, one of the best post scorers in NBA history, and that's Hakeem Olajuwon, the third best center of all time. And he averaged 21.8 points in his career, 11.1 rebounds in his career, and got 12 blocks twice, both against the Utah Jazz. Plus, He had 52 points in his career high, which isn't too stunning, but it's still a good career high. For the Indiana Pacers, there's nobody else in the conversation for this one. It's Reggie Miller, best Pacer of all time by far. He's amazing three-point shooters, definitely the best in his era, and he averaged 18 points in his career. Besides the points per game and 3 points per game, nothing else is stunning. But stats can't show everything. He was a great player besides the stats. Plus, one time he had 8 points in 9 seconds against the New York Knicks. For the Los Angeles Clippers, we have Chris Paul. Great alley-oop passer to Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan. And he has one of the best assist-to-turnover ratios of all time. Besides Jason Kidd, John Stockton, and Steve Nash, he's one of the best passers of all time. For the Los Angeles Lakers, this was a tough one for me, but I ended up taking Kobe Bryant over Shaq, Wilt, and Kareem and Magic Johnson. Because Kobe, besides the stats, he was still one of the most clutch players in NBA history. He averaged 25 points per game, 5.2 rebounds, and 4.7 assists. Plus, he got a couple of steals in clutch moments and hit many of fadeaway buzzers. He was one of the best players ever with the fadeaway. For the Memphis Grizzlies, they haven't had too many great players in their years, but Marc Gasol has to be my number one. He made a couple of All-Star games. He is a great center. He had his prime years, but he's fell down. But when he played the best was on the Memphis Grizzlies, so that's why I chose him for the best of all time on the Memphis Grizzlies. For the Miami Heat, we have Dwayne Wade. And the reason I picked him over LeBron, I said earlier in the video, because I took LeBron on the Cavs. But Dwayne Wade, top 20 player of all time in my opinion, maybe 18, maybe 19. But Dwayne, one of the greatest players of all time, had one of the best buzzer beater shots, and it was in one of his last games. So that's how much he cares about the game and makes good plays in clutch moments. For the Milwaukee Bucks, we have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar over Giannis and Oscar Robertson. Pretty reasonable, very reasonable actually. Greatest center of all time, and he's not going to be broken for the most points of all time. 38,000 points. LeBron has a chance, but if he doesn't play 3 more years, he's not going to get it. So Kareem has a record that may not ever be broken. For the Minnesota Timberwolves, we have Kevin Garnett. He is the best Timberwolves player of all time, and that's obvious. Only if Kevin Garnett can become better than him, he's going to stay that way for a pretty long time. But Kevin Garnett's obviously the best T-Wolves player ever because he's in the top 25. In my opinion, he's the 25th best all time because there's a lot of players better than him, but besides him, the T-Wolves' second best player, Cat, is not in the top 100 yet. For the New Orleans Pelicans, we have a player still in the league, Anthony Davis. In his career so far, he averages 23.9 points, 10.2 rebounds, and 2.3 blocks. He's a rising star, still a great player. I think he could win MVP when he hits 33. He's a great player, and the Pelicans haven't been a franchise for so long. The best Pelican ever is Chris Paul, but Anthony Davis wasn't already taken, so this is why I took him. For the New York Knicks, it basically came down to Patrick Ewing or Willis Reed, and I took Ewing. He's a great scorer. Didn't average totally a double-double, but 21.8 points and 9.8 rebounds. Plus, he got a lot of blocks per game, and he blew a couple games, but he's better than Willis Reed all time, in my opinion. For the Oklahoma City Thunder, I chose Kevin Durant because I can't choose a Supersonics player. And also, he is top 20 all time, in my opinion, and nobody else on the Thunder rankings come close. He's going to be one of the all-time greats, and no other Thunder will come really close except maybe Westbrook. For the Orlando Magic, I chose Shaquille O'Neal because he averaged 23.7 points, 10.9 rebounds, and 2.3 blocks. And he was one of the most dominant players in the paint at his time, and he might be the most dominant player to ever play. For the Philadelphia 76ers, I chose Wilt Chamberlain because he averaged 50 points one season, scored 100 points, and he was the most dominant player in his era. Before Shaq, he was definitely the most dominant player ever. And that's over Bill Russell, that's over George Mikan, and that's over some other great players. For the Phoenix Suns, I chose Charles Barkley because he made 11 All-Star appearances, scored a lot of rebounds, and for his height, he grabbed a bunch of rebounds, only 6'7", small forward, power forward, or center. He could play any of those positions, and he has some great commercials. It came down to Clyde Drexler, Bill Walton, or Damian Lillard, and I chose Clyde because he's the greatest Portland Trailblazer of all time. And here's why. He was great at dunking, he was great at stealing, an amazing scorer, and he could pass the ball very well. For the Sacramento Kings, we have the first person to get triple doubles and average them in a season. Russell Westbrook already broke his record, but Oscar was the first person to get triple doubles consistently. 10 rebounds, 10 assists, and 20 points. That's a good stat line. And especially before that time, nobody could do it till him. For the San Antonio Spurs, I chose Tim Duncan because he was the big fundamental. He had everything he needed in the toolbox, and he could score in the paint, and that was his game. He belonged in the 60s era, and if he played in that era, he would have been very good. And he's the best Spur of all time, over David Robinson and Kawhi. For the Toronto Raptors, I chose Vince Carter because he's the most filthiest dunker of all time. Also, he could shoot threes by the end of his career, and he proved that he didn't lose much athleticism from the beginning. And he's definitely the best Raptor of all time. For the Washington Wizards, we have Wes Unseld. I picked him because he was great at the outlet pass and great at post scoring, defense, blocks, steals, and he was one of the first people to do the outlet pass. For the Utah Jazz, we have John Stockton, and it came down to Stockton or Malone. The reason I chose Stockton is because he averaged so much steals, so much assists, and a lot of points. He was with Malone. Malone just got all the buckets and rebounds, but Stockton led the league of all time in steals and assists. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to like, subscribe, and put on the notification bell.